Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This day in sports history. Hey, and welcome to today's edition of This Day in Sports History. It's May 25th, and on this day in 1965, it was Muhammad Ali's famous Phantom Punch. This is Ali versus Sonny Liston, the rematch. The first bout on February 25, 1964, in Miami, ended with Liston failing to answer the bell for round 7, and the fighter, then still known as Cassius Clay, taking Liston's heavyweight crown. There were shouts of a fix, an investigation was conducted, but it was determined that Liston had injured his arm in the fight, and the shouts of a fixed fight drifted into echoes. For more on that fight and things that happened prior to, during, and after the match, you can go back and listen to the February 25th edition of This Dish. Several things happened between the first match and the second. Ali thought that people would call his win against Liston a fluke, and he wanted to prove to the world that he was deserving of the heavyweight title. A rematch was initially agreed to be fought in Boston in November of '64, but Ali developed a hernia a few days prior to the bout that required surgery, and the fight was delayed and rescheduled and relocated to Lewiston, Maine for May 25, 1965. Lewiston was a rather unusual place to hold a fight of this caliber. This was the first ever heavyweight title fight that the state had ever hosted, and it would be the last. The venue only held about 2,500 people, and it was packed. The referee appointed for the fight was former heavyweight champ Jersey Joe Walcott. This would also prove to be controversial, and he would never referee another fight after this one. When the bell rang to start this one, Ali began circling clockwise like a second hand around Liston in the center of the ring. Liston stalked. Ali danced. Liston leaned in to throw a punch. Ali got a counter jab in. And then about midway through the first round, Liston threw a left. Ali countered with a right over the left and tagged Liston's jaw. But nobody saw it. It was a phantom punch, or what Ali called his anchor punch, and he had been working on it for this fight, and he would use it for a lot of fights after. But the result of the so-called phantom punch was that Sonny went down with his back on the mat, Ali standing over him, shouting to get up and fight, and nobody's going to believe this. At that moment, the shutter of ringside photographer Neil Leifer's camera blinked, capturing the now iconic image of Ali standing over the prone Liston. Jersey Joe tried to get Ali to go to a neutral corner, but Ali was still yelling at Liston, and that's where everybody remembers the fight ending. But there was actually more to it. Ali went into a victory dance around the ring, and Walcott never started a count on Liston. When he came back to Liston, the fighter was up on his feet. Walcott held Liston's gloves in his hands, standing between the two fighters, but he looked confused. He looked at the ringside judges, asking what the count had been. And then Walcott stepped away and he leaned over the ropes trying to get a consensus on the count that he never started. When Walcott stepped away, the two fighters considered that to be the restart of the fight. Ali actually landed several more punches before Walcott came back in between the fighters and officially stopped the fight. It was a first-round knockout for Ali, and he retained the title. Immediately, shouts of "fake" were screamed from those in attendance. Nobody had seen the punch that put Liston on the mat. Once again, talk of a fix were bandied about. Author Paul Gallagher says that Liston's wife and child had been kidnapped by the mob prior to the fight, and they were being held captive. And unless Sonny took a dive, they were going to be seriously hurt or maybe even killed. Sonny's connection with the Chicago Mafia was well known. But when folks started to look at the film of the fight a little closer and a little slower, a connection between Ali's right hand and Liston's jaw could actually be seen. The punch was real. Whether it caused the damage that Liston showed that night is debatable, But after this fight, Liston was damaged goods. Nobody would touch him for a title fight, and he struggled until his death in 1970. Okay, moving on to this day in 1993, it was Game 2 of the NBA Eastern Conference Finals between the Chicago Bulls and the New York Knicks at Madison Square Garden. Okay, so 93, Bulls, playoffs. This has got to be an MJ story, right? Nope. The man doing the posterizing on this night was John Starks. As was prone to happen when the Knicks played the Bulls back then, they would blow a big lead and eventually lose. Well, following that script, the Knicks had a 14-point lead in the third, and then the Bulls came roaring back. With 50 seconds to play, the lead was just 3. The Knicks' John Starks had the ball and was working on B.J. Armstrong. After leaving Armstrong like he was stuck in cement, Starks broke to the basket, elevated, switched the ball from his right to his left, and dunked it over Horace, Grant, and Jordan. Calling the action that night was Marv Albert.
We're down to 50 seconds left in the fourth quarter. Starks, yes! What a move by Starks, who was able to sky to the basket. The Bulls call for time. John Starks with the move of the night to give the Knicks a 5-point lead with 47 seconds remaining in the fourth.
That helped the Knicks to hang on to the lead and win 96-91, evening up the series at a game apiece. But the Bulls would go on to win the series and eventually the NBA championship for the third straight year. But at least on this night, John Starks added a little variety to the same old song and dance. Let's stay on the hardwood for what happened on this night in 2002. It was Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals between the New Jersey Nets and the Boston Celtics. The Nets built up a 15-point lead after one. It was a 20-point lead at the half. It would eventually balloon to a 26-point lead in the third quarter. But a steal and a bucket by Boston's Rodney Rogers in the closing seconds of the third was a shadow of what was to come in the fourth. Paul Pierce was unstoppable in the final quarter. When Pierce hit a free throw with 46 seconds left in the game, the Celtics had their first lead since they led 1-0 back in the first. Pierce scored 19 of the Celtics' 41 fourth-quarter points to turn a 26-point deficit into a 4-point Boston win. It was the second biggest comeback in NBA playoff history at the time, and the 21-point hole they faced to start the fourth was the largest fourth-quarter deficit overcome in the playoffs. The Nets would go on to win the series, though, and face the Los Angeles Lakers in the finals. And finally today, in 1935, Babe Ruth hit the final home runs of his career, belting 3 for the Boston Braves while driving in 6 runs and going 4 for 4 on the day. This was at Pittsburgh's Forbes Field, and Ruth proved he still had pop in his bat. Career home run number 714 cleared the ballpark and was estimated to be a 600-foot shot, but it was never measured. It was the first ball ever hit out of Forbes Field, which had been around since 1909. Unfortunately, the Braves could not muster much more on this day, and the Babes' efforts were in an 11-7 losing effort to the Pirates. Time now for today's non-sports Did You Know? Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon holds the record for the longest time spent on the Billboard charts at 14 years, 3 months. That's all for today. Thanks for stopping by, and thanks to all those who have recently rated the podcast, either on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That is greatly appreciated. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow for another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. we wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.